Tuesday, 2:47 p.m. First National Bank, downtown Chicago. The air carried the usual weekday buzz, lines forming, heels tapping against polished marble, muffled conversations between tellers and clients. Then the rhythm snapped. All eyes turned as a man in faded jeans and a gray hoodie stepped up to the counter, sliding forward a check worth more than most people's lifetimes. David Williams did not carry himself like someone desperate. He moved with quiet certainty, his posture neither arrogant nor timid. He simply placed the check on the counter, waiting for the process every customer expects: verify, stamp, deposit. But the bank manager, Marcus Wellington, had no intention of treating him like every other customer. Marcus emerged from his glass office with a swagger sharpened by entitlement. His Italian leather shoes echoed against the marble floor. He glanced at the check, then at David, and his lip curled. "This?" Marcus held up the slip of paper between two fingers, as though it were contaminated. "This is a joke. Who gave you this?" David's face remained unreadable. "That's a legitimate business check. I'd like to deposit it." A few customers shifted closer, sensing drama. The security guard leaned on his radio. Phones lifted discreetly as the first recording began. Marcus smirked, voice pitched to carry across the lobby. "You really think you can walk in here looking like that and pass off millions of dollars? Not in my bank." Laughter rippled from a corner where a Chanel-draped woman adjusted her pearls. Another man, in a sharp navy suit, nodded approvingly. The spectacle had begun. Marcus produced a gleaming silver lighter from his pocket. He clicked it open, the small flame flickering dangerously close to the paper. Gasps filled the room. "You want to pass off trash? Let me show everyone what happens to trash." The check caught instantly, fire devouring numbers and ink consuming possibility itself. Marcus held it high, eyes glittering with triumph, as ashes flaked and scattered like dark snow. Then he dropped the burning paper at David's feet, grinding it beneath his heel until nothing but smudged fragments clung to the marble. Phones tilted to capture the moment. A blonde woman near the entrance whispered her commentary into a live stream. "He just torched it. Manager burned the check. Oh my God." Her viewer count climbed in real time. David did not flinch. His sneakers stood amid the scattered remains, the smoke curling around him, the acrid stench hanging heavy. He lowered his gaze briefly, then lifted it again to meet Marcus's eyes. Calm. Too calm. And in that silence, something shifted. Not for Marcus, not for the applauding customers, but for the few who noticed the subtle details. The glint of a Swiss watch beneath David's sleeve. The way he didn't protest, didn't plead, didn't even raise his voice. He simply observed. The crowd didn't see dignity. They saw weakness. And that mistake would cost them. Pause here just for a second. If this story grips you already, don't forget to subscribe to Echoes of Hope Stories HQ. And while you're here, drop your country flag in the comments. We want to see where you're watching from. Marcus, drunk on the moment, raised his voice louder. "Everyone look, this is how we handle fraud in my bank. Fake check, fake man, fake story, burn it all." The crowd chuckled nervously. A businessman muttered, "Should have called the cops, but burning it works just as well." Marcus leaned closer, eyes narrowed with satisfaction. "Tell me, what's your real name?" "Don't bother lying, we'll know soon enough." David's hand twitched near his jacket pocket, then dropped again. He stood motionless, an island of quiet in a sea of noise. The digital wall clock clicked to 2:48 p.m., exactly 12 minutes until his board meeting. His phone buzzed, ignored. The crowd roared with approval as Marcus gave a theatrical bow, playing for cameras now. And then something no one expected. David's gaze shifted, just slightly, and the hint of a smile touched the corners of his mouth. The kind of smile that said, "You have no idea who you're dealing with." The flames died as quickly as they had sparked, leaving a trail of blackened fragments across the pristine marble floor. Wisps of smoke still rose in thin threads, carrying the acrid smell of charred paper that clung stubbornly to the air. The scent was unmistakable. Burnt ink, burnt value, burnt respect. It spread through the bank like an invisible stain, marking every corner of the lobby. Marcus Wellington leaned back, satisfied with his performance. He brushed imaginary dust from his tailored blazer, nodding at the circle of onlookers who had gathered to watch. "That," he declared, pointing to the ash pile at David's feet, "is how you deal with fraud. Quick, decisive, and permanent." An elderly white woman in a designer suit clapped softly, her rings glinting under the recessed ceiling lights. "Bravo, Marcus," she said, her voice laced with approval. "About time someone showed courage." Another customer muttered loudly enough to be heard. "This city needs more bankers like him. Can't let people like that walk in here pretending they belong." The words hung in the air heavier than the smoke. Phones continued to rise, capturing every second, every insult, every flicker of humiliation. A teenager near the ATM whispered to her camera, "This is insane. He burned it. He actually burned the check." Her live stream view counter ticked upward, hundreds joining by the minute. David stood still, his sneakers marked with flecks of ash. He didn't move to wipe them off. He didn't argue. His breathing was even, his eyes calm. For those watching closely, his lack of reaction was unsettling, almost unnerving. But most in the crowd mistook his composure for defeat. Marcus thrived on that assumption. He puffed out his chest, voice booming louder. "Look closely, ladies and gentlemen. Fraud doesn't stand a chance in this establishment. Not today. Not ever." The assistant manager, shifting uneasily behind the counter, avoided eye contact. Her glance flicked between the smoldering remains and the man who refused to react, something tugging at her instincts. Still, she said nothing. Marcus's dominance left no room for dissent. The security guard spoke into his radio, tone clipped and urgent. "Possible fraud suspect. Check destroyed. Send backup immediately." His words echoed with authority, sealing David in the role Marcus had assigned him. Criminal, imposter, trespasser. David's phone buzzed again inside his pocket. He ignored it, though his hand lingered for a fraction of a second. The crowd noticed the movement. "Who's calling you now, huh?" Marcus jeered, pointing at him with theatrical exaggeration. "Your accomplices? Your getaway driver? Doesn't matter. They'll see the same thing we're all seeing. Ashes." The Chanel-clad woman chuckled, covering her mouth in mock modesty. "Exactly. Burn it before it spreads," she whispered to her companion. David shifted slightly, his posture still relaxed, his gaze lowering briefly to the ashes scattered across the floor. Then, almost imperceptibly, his wrist turned. The face of a Swiss watch gleamed under the lights. Its hands ticked with quiet finality. 2:53 p.m., 7 minutes until his next appointment. The sight didn't register with the crowd. They were too busy feeding on the spectacle, their commentary growing bolder, uglier. A man in a gray suit muttered, "What's next? He'll probably pull out a stolen credit card to match." Another chimed in, "They always think they can outsmart the system. Not today." Marcus caught the energy and rode it higher. He bent down, kicking at the charred remains with his polished shoe, scattering fragments even further across the marble. "See this?" he announced. "Evidence destroyed, case closed." The teenager's phone shook as she zoomed in on David's face. Her voice lowered in awe. "Why isn't he saying anything? He's just standing there." That question spread silently, even among those who mocked him. Why didn't he defend himself? Why didn't he yell or demand justice, or call for someone higher up? His silence wasn't weakness, it was weight. David adjusted his stance, one hand resting lightly against his side. His expression remained unreadable, though his eyes briefly lifted to meet Marcus's, with a look so steady it made the manager hesitate for a heartbeat. Just a heartbeat, then arrogance returned. The crowd didn't catch the shift. They only saw a manager triumphant, a customer humiliated. But in the quiet moments between jeers and applause, in the silence of a man who refused to flinch, the real story was beginning to unfold. And every second the clock ticked closer to 3 p.m., the closer everyone in that lobby was to learning who David Williams truly was. Marcus wasn't finished. His heel pressed into the blackened scraps on the floor, grinding them further until the marble gleamed with streaks of ash. He smirked and looked around as though expecting applause. "See?" he said loudly, turning his voice into a performance. "Fraud dealt with, right in front of your eyes." Phones lifted higher. The teenager near the ATM shouted into her live feed, #BankBurnsCheck. This is wild. Manager's a beast. Comments rolled across her screen so fast she couldn't keep up. David remained silent. He shifted slightly, hands at his side, gaze steady. He could have been carved from stone. That calmness only pushed Marcus further into arrogance. "What's this?" Marcus sneered suddenly, spotting a slim leather wallet peeking from David's jacket pocket. With a swift motion, he yanked it free before David could react. He held it aloft like a prizefighter showing off his belt. Well, what do we have here?" Marcus announced, snapping it open with exaggerated flair. "Credit cards. Multiple. Let me guess. Stolen." The Chanel-clad woman clasped her hands together. "Excellent work, Marcus. You've exposed the whole scheme." Her voice carried, emboldening others. A man in a navy suit muttered, "They always come prepared. Fake checks, stolen cards, it's all the same story." Phones zoomed in on the wallet. A teenager's TikTok caption appeared almost instantly. "Manager busts scammer. Fake check and stolen cards. Savage." Views surged. David's eyes followed his wallet, but his face never shifted from that same unnerving calm. He didn't lunge, didn't argue. He simply spoke, his voice even, almost too quiet for the crowd. "I'd like my wallet back." The request sounded more like a statement of fact than a plea. Marcus laughed sharply, flipping through the contents like a magician. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're seeing here is the full criminal package. Fake check burned, fraudulent cards in hand, and next, I'm sure, a fake ID to top it all off." The Chanel-clad woman actually clapped this time. Textbook, Marcus. Absolutely textbook. The crowd fed on the performance. More phones angled closer, eager for angles, eager for the content. Hashtags spread across platforms. Bank burn check, manager justice, fraud exposed. And still, David said nothing more. Marcus circled him slowly, brandishing the wallet like evidence in a courtroom. "You walk in here dressed like you crawled out of a discount store, trying to play big man with a check larger than most people's homes. Did you really think you'd fool us?" Whispers buzzed through the lobby. Unbelievable nerve. He thought he could get away with it. Not in this bank. The assistant manager hovered behind the counter, wringing her hands. She kept glancing between David's quiet face and the wallet in Marcus's hand, as though her instincts screamed that something wasn't adding up. But Marcus's voice drowned her hesitation. David finally moved, not forward, not toward Marcus, but toward the leather seating area near the window. The security guard motioned sharply. "Sit down. Wait until authorities arrive." David lowered himself into the chair without protest. He adjusted his posture deliberately, yet crossing one leg over the other, resting an arm along the side of the seat. His demeanor was not one of a man cornered, it was of a man biding his time. Phones swung toward him again. Viewers watching online typed frantically, "Why is he so calm? He looks almost confident. Something's off." But in the bank lobby, those voices were drowned by the louder chorus. "Criminal. Lock him up. Marcus is a hero." The contrast sharpened, arrogance in one corner, calm dignity in the other. Marcus strutted, fueled by the mob's approval. David sat still, eyes dropping briefly to his watch. 2:55 p.m. 5 minutes. His expression didn't crack, though the faintest flicker of amusement traced his lips. Marcus slammed the wallet shut with dramatic force. "You're not going anywhere. Not until every one of these cards is checked against police records. Fraudsters don't walk free here." The crowd nodded in satisfaction. The Chanel customer leaned forward, her voice clear enough for David to hear. "That's what happens to their kind. Burn the lies before they spread." The words struck harder than the smoke still lingering in the air. Phones caught her sneer. Some online viewers cheered. Others recoiled. But inside the lobby, the hostile energy only grew. David leaned back slightly in his chair, gaze sweeping the room as though memorizing faces. His calm was no longer passive, it was purposeful. Almost like a countdown. The digital clock ticked toward 2:56 p.m. The performance wasn't finished, but the stage was already shifting beneath Marcus Wellington's polished shoes. And for the first time, a few people in that lobby began to sense it. The numbers kept climbing. The teenager's live stream ticked past 1,200 viewers, then 1,500 within seconds. Comments scrolled so fast they blurred across her screen. "Torch him. Manager's a legend. Only in America." Another viewer typed, "Look how calm he is. Something doesn't fit." But the louder voices drowned the few questioning ones. The mob wasn't looking for truth, they were looking for entertainment. Marcus fed them exactly that. He strutted across the lobby, waving David's wallet like a prize. He thrived on the chorus around him, the affirmations, the cameras. Every step, every gesture, every boast was for the audience, both inside and online. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus announced, his voice echoing against the marble, "you are witnessing fraud crushed in real time. A masterclass in vigilance." The Chanel-clad woman raised her phone high, her commentary cutting through the noise. "I hope they put him in cuffs. People like that need to be taught a lesson." A chant rose near the counter. First one voice, then two, then more. "Lock him up. Lock him up." The rhythm grew louder. Some joined half-heartedly, swept up by the energy. Others shouted with conviction, their voices carrying judgment that was less about evidence and more about who David was. Sarah Mitchell, standing behind the teller line, felt her throat tighten. She had worked under Marcus long enough to know his love for theatrics. She had seen him embellish, exaggerate, even humiliate when he sensed the opportunity. But this, burning a check worth millions, waving a wallet like it was stolen property, felt different. Her eyes flicked toward David. He was still seated, one leg crossed, posture straight, expression calm. Too calm. Sarah had dealt with fraudsters before. Real fraudsters panicked. They sweated, stammered, begged. They didn't sit in leather chairs with the composure of someone waiting for a delayed meeting. Her instincts screamed at her. But Marcus's presence pressed down like a weight. He dominated the space. His authority, his booming voice, his relentless certainty, it made speaking up feel dangerous. Still, doubt gnawed at her. David's phone buzzed again, vibrating against the armrest of the chair. He pulled it from his pocket, glanced at the screen for a fraction of a second, then placed it face down beside him. The ignored call only fueled Marcus. "See that?" Marcus crowed. His little network can't wait to hear if the scam worked. "Bad news, folks, it didn't. Not in my bank." The crowd chuckled, murmuring approval. The chant returned, harsher now. "Lock him up! Lock him up!" Sarah's stomach turned. She knew the words weren't just about fraud, they were about him, his hoodie, his skin, the way he didn't fit their image of wealth. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to keep quiet, but her fingers tightened on the edge of the counter until her knuckles whitened. David didn't respond. He leaned back slightly, eyes sweeping the lobby as though he were the one observing them. The live feeds captured it, that strange stillness, and the online comments split further. "Why so calm? He's guilty, look at him. Nah, he's too composed." "Something's coming." Marcus turned his back on David, facing the crowd like a conductor directing an orchestra. "Let this be a lesson," he declared. "No one walks in here and cheats hard-working citizens. We fight back." Phones shook with excitement. Screenshots spread to Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Within minutes, hashtags trended. Bank burns check, manager justice, scammer caught. The bank lobby wasn't just a financial institution anymore. It was a stage, a courtroom, and an execution ground rolled into one. Sarah's pulse quickened. She looked again at David. He wasn't shrinking under the hostility. If anything, he seemed almost waiting. The faint gleam of his watch caught her eye. She squinted. That wasn't the kind of watch you picked up at a mall kiosk. It was real. Expensive. The kind worn by executives, not con men. For a moment, her instincts screamed louder than Marcus's performance. Something about him didn't add up. But fear held her tongue. The chant swelled again. "Lock him up, lock him up." David finally moved. He picked up his buzzing phone, silenced it, and set it back down without answering. Then he glanced at the clock. 2:58 p.m. His lips curved slightly, just enough for Sarah to notice. She shivered. Because in that fleeting smile, she realized the show wasn't Marcus's to control anymore. It was David's. The wall clock's red digits glowed. 2:58 p.m. Only 2 minutes until the hour. David adjusted slightly in his chair, his sleeve slipping just enough to reveal the gleam of that Swiss watch again. Its polished surface caught the overhead light, a quiet reminder of time's relentless march. He studied it for a second longer than before, calm, measured, as though he was counting down. Sarah noticed. Her stomach tightened. Something about that watch bothered her, not in the way Marcus insisted everything about David was fake, but in the way it contradicted the image Marcus painted. Fraudsters didn't wear authentic pieces worth more than most monthly salaries. Fraudsters didn't sit still as an entire lobby turned against them. Her voice trembled as she leaned toward Marcus. "Sir, maybe we should." "Quiet," Marcus snapped, not even turning to face her. He was too busy feeding his moment, his eyes darting from phone to phone as people live-streamed his heroism. His chest puffed, his voice pitched perfectly for the cameras. "This," he declared, sweeping his arm toward David, "is how we protect honest Americans. We do not tolerate fraud. We do not allow criminals to steal from our community. We stand tall, we act decisively, and we show everyone that justice is not optional, it's mandatory." Cheers rippled across the crowd. A man in a suit clapped. A Chanel-clad woman raised her voice. "That's leadership. That's courage." Hashtags continued exploding online. Manager Justice hit trending status. Screenshots of Marcus with the burning check spread faster than the smoke still lingering faintly in the lobby. And through it all, David remained silent. He leaned back in the leather chair, one leg crossed over the other, phone resting by his side. His face betrayed nothing except the faint trace of amusement, so faint most would miss it. But Sarah saw, and it rattled her. Why wasn't he panicking? Why wasn't he fighting back? Fraud suspects always unraveled under pressure, sweat on their brows, anger in their voices, desperate attempts to justify themselves. This man did none of that. He looked as if he was waiting for the world to catch up to something only he knew. Then, faint but unmistakable, the wail of sirens drifted in from the street outside. Heads turned, phones angled toward the doors. "Here they come," someone muttered with satisfaction. Finally. Marcus straightened, brushing his blazer, adjusting his tie. He basked in the sound like it was the national anthem. "Excellent," he said loudly. "The authorities will see the evidence. They'll back me up, just like always." The chant began again. "Lock him up, lock him up." Growing stronger as the flashing lights of approaching squad cars painted faint streaks across the glass doors. Sarah's heart raced. The sirens weren't reassuring to her. They were a countdown. She stole another glance at David. That watch, those shoes, his posture, it all screamed money, not fraud. She wanted to speak, to say something, before the police stormed in and made everything worse. "Marcus," she whispered again, more urgently this time. "Something doesn't feel right. Look at his watch. Look at his shoes. Look at him. None of this adds up." Marcus turned sharply, his face tightening in annoyance. "Are you questioning me, Sarah? In front of customers? In front of cameras?" She froze. His tone wasn't just irritated, it was threatening. He lowered his voice enough that only she could hear. "You keep your doubts to yourself if you value your job." Her throat went dry. She nodded quickly, retreating back behind the counter. Marcus spun back toward the crowd, smile plastered across his face again. "Ladies and gentlemen, justice is about to walk through those doors. You've witnessed what it means to stand guard over your community. To every honest citizen I say this: stay vigilant, stay strong, and never let criminals like this man think they can take advantage of us." Applause broke out. Phones shook with excitement. The chant hit louder than ever. "Lock him up! Lock him up!" David checked his watch one last time, 2:59 p.m. He inhaled softly, exhaled just as quietly, then let the smallest, calmest smile curve across his lips. And for Sarah, watching from behind the counter, it was the most unsettling thing she had seen all afternoon. Because that smile didn't belong to a man about to be arrested. It belonged to a man who knew the entire room was about to learn exactly who he really was. 2:59 p.m. The red digits pulsed on the wall clock, marking the final minute of Marcus Wellington's performance. The crowd hummed with energy, bones tilted upward, chants still echoing. David unfolded his arms and leaned forward, finally stirring from the quiet composure that had defined him since the fire began. The security guard stiffened immediately. One stepped closer, hand brushing the radio clipped to his belt. The other widened his stance, ready for a confrontation. David rose slowly from the leather chair, his movements deliberate, unhurried. Every eye followed him. Phones zoomed in, live streams jittered as dozens of viewers begged in real time. "What's he doing? Don't let him move. Cops will be there any second." Marcus sneered, brandishing the wallet again. "Sit back down," he ordered, his voice cracking slightly as David's calmness gnawed at his authority. "You're not going anywhere until the police process you." But David didn't argue. He didn't rush. Instead, he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. The guards tensed, ready to strike if anything threatened the lobby. What emerged was no weapon, no ID, no phone, just a single simple white business card. David stepped forward and, without a word, placed it gently on the marble counter, directly beside the pile of scattered ashes Marcus had left in triumph. The card landed softly, almost too softly to register against the noise. But somehow the quiet action sliced through the chaos sharper than a shout. For a moment, the crowd didn't understand. Cameras zoomed in, the teenager adjusted her phone, trying to capture the tiny piece of cardstock. One of the guards leaned closer, squinting at the print. His lips moved silently as he read. Then his face drained of color. "David Williams, Chairman and CEO, Williams Capital Group." The guard froze. The second guard leaned in to confirm, his jaw clenched, his hand slipping off the radio. The teenager's live stream caught it, her voice breaking mid-sentence. Wait, you guys, look at this. Oh my God, this man owns the bank?" Within seconds, the comment section erupted. "No way. Plot twist of the century." Manager just burned his own boss's check. Screens flooded with screenshots of the card. The hashtag shifted instantly, CEO Justice climbing alongside bank burns check. Sarah Mitchell gasped aloud. She covered her mouth with both hands, eyes wide, staring at the card as if it were glowing. The watch, the shoes, the composure. It all clicked into place with terrifying speed. Marcus blinked, then barked out a laugh that sounded more desperate than confident. He waved the wallet in one hand and pointed at the card with the other. Are you people serious? Anyone can print that at Kinko's for $5. You think some hoodie-wearing fraud suddenly runs this institution? Ridiculous. But his voice carried less conviction now. He spoke louder, faster, his arrogance cracking at the edges. David didn't respond. He simply stepped back, hands loosely at his sides, allowing the crowd to wrestle with what they were seeing. The silence he carried was no longer mistaken for weakness. It was power, the kind that doesn't need volume to be heard. Phones surged closer. Viewers demanded clarity. Check the name. Search him up. If that's real, this manager is finished. The guards exchanged glances. One shifted uneasily on his feet, his training colliding with the reality of what he had just read. Sarah whispered, voice trembling, Marcus, his name is on the executive files. I've seen it before. That's not fake. Marcus whirled on her. Enough. Do you want to lose your job for insubordination? His face flushed red, his bravado slipping into rage. But Sarah didn't back down this time. Her wide eyes stayed fixed on David. That man is not a fraud, she said louder now, her voice cutting across the lobby. The tension thickened. Phones caught every word. Comments exploded. Assistant manager just confirmed it. Marcus is done. David glanced at the clock again. 3 p.m., exactly on time. His lips curved into a smile, not gloating, not mocking. Just a quiet acknowledgement of what had finally been revealed. Truth doesn't shout. It doesn't need flames or theatrics. It arrives softly like a card on marble. And when it lands, it shatters lies louder than fire ever could. For a moment, the card sat there alone on the counter, the white surface stark against the black ashes scattered across the marble. Marcus's laugh still echoed faintly when David reached into his jacket once more. The guards tensed again, bracing for another surprise. But instead of another card, David pulled out a sleek black tablet, the kind executives carried in boardrooms rather than lobbies. He held it with practiced ease, swiped the screen awake, and with a few taps began a demonstration that no one could ignore. What now? Marcus scoffed, though his voice carried less certainty than before. Fake electronics to go with the fake card? David didn't answer. He navigated to an application most of the crowd had never seen before. The corporate board portal of First National Bank. The logo glowed in blue across the glass, followed by a login page labeled Executive Access Only. A hush rippled through the crowd. Phones zoomed in on the glowing screen. David's fingers moved across the display with the confidence of someone who had entered those credentials countless times. His username appeared, Williams, principal shareholder. His password followed, entered without hesitation. The screen refreshed, and then it appeared, crisp and undeniable. David Williams, chairman of the board, Williams Capital Group, ownership stake, 73%. Executive authority, level 10. Next meeting, emergency session, customer service review, 3 p.m. The clock above the lobby doors struck 3 p.m. The silence was deafening. The first guard's radio slipped from his hand and clattered against the marble floor. He didn't even bother to pick it up. The second guard took an unconscious step back, as though the ground beneath his polished shoes had shifted. The live stream captured everything. Comments exploded. Oh my God, it's real. The manager burned his own boss's check. This just flipped. Sarah Mitchell pressed both palms flat against the counter, her chest tight with a mix of shock and relief. She had doubted Marcus for months, endured his arrogance, but she had never dared to speak out. Now the truth glowed across that tablet for the entire world to see. Marcus, she whispered, barely able to form the words. He's the chairman. But Marcus clung to denial like a lifeline. He jabbed a finger at the screen. This proves nothing. Anyone can make a fake interface. It's all part of the scam. No one moved. No one cheered. The applause, the chants, the smug commentary, all of it evaporated into uneasy murmurs. The Chanel-clad woman lowered her phone, her lips parting as she read the screen again and again, her certainty unraveling. The man in the navy suit cleared his throat uncomfortably, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. David tilted the tablet slightly, ensuring that everyone, crowd, guards, phones, and livestream could see the undeniable truth. He didn't raise his voice, didn't gloat. He simply stood there, letting the silence speak louder than Marcus ever could. The reversal was complete. A check reduced to ashes, a man reduced to ridicule. And now, digital proof rising above the smoke. Ashes couldn't erase ownership. Fire couldn't burn authority. One of the online viewers typed what many in the lobby were thinking. He never needed to yell. He knew the truth would land. Sarah's eyes burned as she watched Marcus struggle. The same man who strutted like a king minutes earlier now looked small, his face flushing red, his hands twitching at his sides. She whispered under her breath, "Poetic justice," though no one around her seemed to hear. David lowered the tablet gently to the counter beside the card, placing proof next to proof. White paper, glowing screen. The past destroyed in ashes, the present secured in data. The crowd murmured louder now, uneasy, restless. "Is this real? He's the chairman? What happens now?" Marcus opened his mouth, searching for words, but none came. And in that silence, the entire lobby understood. The man they had mocked, accused, and cheered against was not only innocent, he was the very authority Marcus pretended to embody. Truth doesn't shout. It doesn't set itself on fire to be believed. It arrives quietly, undeniably, until even those who doubted are forced to see. And in that bank, surrounded by ashes and glowing proof, everyone finally saw. Marcus's mouth opened, but no words came out. His earlier swagger had evaporated, leaving him stammering in front of a crowd that moments ago praised him as a hero. He jabbed toward the ashes on the marble floor, his voice cracking with desperation. This doesn't change what happened. That check, it was fake. It had to be fake. No one walks in here with millions and looks like that. The crowd, once loud with approval, now shifted uneasily. Phones that had recorded his every boast now captured his unraveling. A few voices murmured from the back. But the portal, it was real. That screen didn't look fake. Sarah Mitchell, who had held her tongue for so long, felt something harden inside her. The truth sat on the counter, undeniable. She stepped out from behind the teller line, her heels clicking across the marble, and raised her voice for everyone to hear. "Sir, you destroyed executive property." Gasps cut through the lobby. Marcus spun toward her, eyes wide, face blotched red. "What did you say?" She stood straighter. "You burned the chairman's check in front of witnesses and cameras. You humiliated him, accused him, and now the truth is here for everyone to see." A ripple moved through the customers. Admiration curdled into embarrassment. The Chanel-clad woman lowered her gaze, adjusting her pearls with trembling fingers. The man in the navy suit cleared his throat and muttered, "If he really is the chairman." His voice trailed off. Phones kept rolling. The live stream comments surged. "Manager's done? She just called him out." From hero to clown in minutes. Marcus waved his hands wildly, his composure gone. "Don't believe this charade. He staged it. He tricked all of you. His voice cracked again as he pointed toward David, who still hadn't raised his tone above a steady calm. David didn't need to. He simply adjusted his watch, straightened his jacket, and looked back at Marcus with the same quiet dignity he had carried all afternoon. The hush deepened. The mob mentality faltered. People who once shouted, "Lock him up," now shifted in discomfort, avoiding eye contact with one another. Their silence was heavier than their earlier chants. Sarah's voice cut through again, stronger this time. "You wanted a show, Marcus, but this isn't justice. It's arrogance. You burned evidence that belonged to the very man who pays your salary." Marcus's eyes darted desperately toward the doors, where the faint wail of sirens grew louder. "The police will side with me," he snapped, but even he didn't sound convinced. His voice trembled with fear he couldn't mask. Then the glass doors opened. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, hands resting near their belts, scanning the scene. They froze at the sight. A crowd with phones raised, ashes scattered across marble, a manager mid-rant, and a composed man standing quietly by the counter. "What's the situation here?" one officer asked, his tone wary. Marcus seized his chance, rushing forward. "Officers, thank God you're here. Fraud suspect, destroyed evidence, stolen cards." He thrust David's wallet toward them like a smoking gun. "I burned the counterfeit check myself." The officers glanced at each other. Their eyes flicked toward the tablet still glowing on the counter. One leaned closer, reading the bold header. His expression shifted instantly. He looked back at David, then at Marcus, then back at David again. David finally spoke, his voice carrying with calm authority. "Gentlemen, allow me to introduce myself properly. David Williams, Chairman and CEO, Williams Capital Group. 73% ownership stake in this bank." The silence in the lobby was absolute. Even the buzzing phones seemed muted. The officers straightened immediately, their postures snapping into respect. "Sir," one said quickly, "our apologies." Marcus's face drained of color. He stammered again, the words broken and hollow. That can't be, you can't." But no one listened to him anymore. The crowd, the guards, the assistant manager, the police, all eyes were fixed on the man they had ridiculed, now revealed as the true power in the room. Maya's reflection hung heavy. Admiration built on prejudice collapses the moment truth walks in. The mob that cheered a false hero now shifted uncomfortably, realizing they had applauded cruelty while dignity sat in silence. And Marcus Wellington, once so sure of his authority, now stood exposed. His arrogance burned to ashes just like the check he destroyed. The silence in the lobby was suffocating. Every face turned toward David, no longer with disdain but with dawning realization. The man they had mocked, dismissed, and accused now stood as the undisputed authority in the room. David broke the stillness, his tone calm yet resolute. "Security," he said, his voice carrying through the marble hall. "Escort Mr. Wellington from the premises immediately." The guards, moments earlier stiff under Marcus's command, shifted without hesitation. They moved toward him, their hands steady, their postures no longer deferential. Marcus stumbled backward, eyes darting between the officers and the guards. "You can't, this is my branch," he sputtered, his voice cracking with desperation. "I've run this bank for years." David's gaze was steady, his words precise. "You've run it with arrogance, not integrity. This bank does not belong to you, and as of this moment, neither does your position." The guards each took an arm, and for the first time, Marcus's polished shoes scuffed helplessly against the marble as he was led away. His protests grew weaker, drowned out by the buzzing of phones and the steady murmur of disbelief from the crowd. Sarah Mitchell stepped forward, trembling slightly, unsure of what to expect. David turned to her, his eyes softening. "Miss Mitchell," he said clearly, ensuring every customer and camera heard him. "Effective immediately, you are promoted to acting branch manager. I trust you to run this branch with professionalism and respect." Her hand flew to her mouth, tears brimming in her eyes. "Sir? Thank you. I won't let you down." "You already haven't," David replied. "You spoke the truth when others were afraid." The live stream captured every second. The hashtags flipped almost instantly. Stash CEO Justice, truth revealed, respect cannot burn. Comments flooded across screens, from fraud suspect to CEO. Manager just lost everything live. That's what dignity looks like. Customers who had cheered Marcus now shrank into silence, their earlier applause feeling like a stain they couldn't scrub away. The Chanel-clad woman lowered her eyes to the floor, clutching her pearls tighter. The businessman who once praised Marcus shifted awkwardly, his phone slipping into his pocket as if burying the evidence of his complicity. David stepped closer to the counter, placing one hand lightly on the marble. His voice, low but unwavering, filled the space. "You tried to burn my worth," he said, his eyes sweeping across the room. "You believed respect was tied to clothing, skin, or assumptions. But dignity doesn't burn. Respect cannot be torched. What you destroyed today was only paper. What remains is truth, and truth always rises." No one moved, no one spoke. Even the officers now standing at ease by the door seemed transfixed by the moment. Sarah bowed her head slightly, her voice breaking the silence. "Sir, on behalf of the staff, I'm sorry for what happened here today." David nodded, his expression thoughtful. "The apology is not yours to carry. It belongs to the man who left in disgrace. But let this serve as a reminder, to staff, to customers, to all watching. Arrogance cannot replace integrity. Justice will always find its voice." The live stream exploded. Viewers replayed his words in real time, captions appearing within seconds. "Dignity doesn't burn. Respect cannot be torched." Screenshots of David's calm face standing above the ashes went viral, an image destined to outlive the flames Marcus thought would define the day. Maya's reflection closed over the scene. Humiliation had been reversed into justice. What began as a public attempt to degrade a black man ended with the exposure of racism itself. Broadcast, recorded, immortalized for the world to see. Marcus had burned a check to prove his authority, but in doing so, he burned his own career. David didn't need fire. He carried something stronger: truth. The bank lobby slowly returned to its muted rhythm. Tellers whispering, customers shifting, guards resuming their posts. But nothing about the atmosphere was the same. The smell of burnt paper still lingered, clinging to the marble floor like a scar. What had begun as humiliation ended as revelation, and everyone present knew they had witnessed something far larger than a dispute over a check. This wasn't just about one man's arrogance or another man's composure. It was about the truth of how racism hides behind polished surfaces. It doesn't always shout from the streets. Sometimes it wears a tailored suit, hides behind a title, and stands beneath the chandeliers of luxury lobbies. Marcus thought his performance would be remembered for strength, but his strength was hollow, built on prejudice and applause from those eager to see another man stripped of dignity. He believed he could burn paper, and with it, burn worth. What he never understood is that dignity cannot be torched. The crowd that had cheered him now walked away in shame. Some pretended to check their phones, others slipped out quietly, unwilling to meet David's eyes. Their silence said everything. They had celebrated cruelty. They had mistaken arrogance for justice, and now they carried the weight of their complicity. Sarah, who found her voice in the middle of chaos, stood taller than she ever had before. Her promotion wasn't just a new role, it was a reminder that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is simply refusing to stay silent while the wrong thing unfolds. And David, the man accused, mocked, humiliated, stood above the ashes without bitterness. His words carved themselves into the room, echoing far beyond marble walls and live stream feeds. Dignity doesn't burn. Respect cannot be torched. That line will live longer than the flames Marcus thought to find the moment. It will echo through every replay of the live stream, through every hashtag that trends, through every person who saw a black man treated as less until truth shattered the lie. The lesson is clear. Arrogance burns fast. It flickers bright, it dazzles for a moment, and then it crumbles into smoke. But dignity, quiet, steady, unflinching, lasts forever. Marcus believed he burned a check. But in truth, he burned his own career. His arrogance was reduced to the same ashes he ground beneath his heel. And what rose from those ashes was not humiliation, but justice. Now, I want to turn this moment to you, the one watching this story. What would you have done in David's place? Would you have stayed calm while the crowd mocked? Would you have waited for truth to reveal itself, or would you have spoken sooner? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear how you see this moment. And as you share, add your country flag too. Let us see how far this story travels. How many places carry the reminder that dignity cannot be destroyed? Finally, if this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you of the power of quiet strength, make sure you subscribe to Echoes of Hope Stories HQ, because stories like this matter. Stories that expose injustice, stories that remind us that dignity is priceless, stories that give voice to the moments others try to erase. Subscribe, like, share, and keep watching, because arrogance burns out quickly, but truth, dignity, and respect, those live forever.